Hey, this is Sho, and thank you so much for checking out the video. By now, I have posted the first 2 hours of Digimon Survive up on YouTube, so if you haven't already checked it out and you want to have a bit of a long take of it, feel free to watch it. What I want to do here in this short video is to talk a bit about my experiences with the first 2 hours of the game. So far, I've clocked in about five and a half hours. And I know that since there are no reviews out right now, at least at the time when I'm recording this, and there hasn't been any review copies, and then Bandai Namco made an announcement about spoilers after Chapter 5, that a lot of people are probably very nervous about this game. So I'm here to hopefully elucidate the nature of the game, and maybe we'll give you some good information on what you want to know about what Digimon Survive really is. So with that said, as per first thoughts format, we're going to talk a bit about gameplay, story, just a tad, and then visuals, audio, and performance. So let's get into it. Gameplay. Digimon Survive is a visual novel, first and foremost. So if you are familiar with the Utawareru Mono series, you'll know exactly what I'm getting at. Basically, a good chunk of this game is involving a visual novel that will have you talking and interacting with objects in an environment very similar to Danganronpa. As you interact with these objects, you'll continue the plot, you'll learn about people, you go through the conversations, and you will be making choices that will directly influence your morality and reputation stats, which in turn will impact your battles and will also impact the narrative of the story. So basically, if you're thinking that this is more like Final Fantasy Tactics or like Triangle Strategy, you probably want to get that out of your head. This game is more visual novel than it is strategy RPG. Speaking of the strategy RPG elements, though, it is a pretty solid strategy RPG. It has all of the bells and whistles that you are familiar with. You have your attacks, you have your positioning, you have your support systems, so it's fairly typical so far. Even the mechanics involving Digi-Evolution are there, and I'm not going to go too far into them in this video, but just know that you have up to, I think, 114 different Digimon that you can get through the game, and to get them, you'll basically need to be careful with your visual novel elements and how you battle. So do look forward to that in the full review that hopefully will be coming a bit later on next week. Getting into the story, this game gets pretty dark pretty quick. I'm not normally one that, cringes or gets little tingles with a horror film, but this game actually did make my hair stand up a little bit. Nothing grotesque and nothing, like absurd, but this game has a very distinct animation style and it plays extremely well into its horror aspects. All the elements of a typical Japanese horror are here. Middle school kids in the middle of nowhere in the countryside in this like old abandoned school. They travel into this portal world where they meet the Digimon. There's a lot of spirits and people are evil, and yeah, there's a lot of supernatural elements, and it really can make your hair stand up if you're familiar with Japanese horror tropes. So if you're not one for horror in games, do be warned that this game does get pretty dark. It goes down the horror genre very, very hard. Even in the first 10-15 minutes of the prologue, you're going to be feeling perhaps a little bit uneasy. But other than that, I do enjoy the story a lot so far. It's very engaging, and that's due to a lot with how the visuals and audio are presented. The visuals themselves, which is worth a big mention, is divided into two different categories. You have your visual novel elements, and then you have your strategy RPG elements, as usual. The visual novel elements are absolutely beautiful, and they look beautiful on the Switch. I was very surprised. It's that Digimon sort of digital computerized animation style that they have that's more common in the modern movies and media. Absolutely beautiful graphics. I just cannot sing praises enough of the art style of the visual novels. It's really, really beautiful. And the way that they handle sort of their expressions, especially when we talk about those horror elements, it does feel very, at least for me, uneasy. So it's really, really fine. Regarding the strategy RPG elements for the visuals, the same level of vibrancy still exists, but they take a bit of, I guess you can call it like a chibi sprite style, I guess is the best way to put it. And it actually looks pretty good in my opinion. I really enjoy how it appears. It's cute, but also in some ways realistic and serious, and that's a blend I can always appreciate for Digimon as a series. So visuals, A-OK, absolutely beautiful. And of course, a good visual novel not only needs to have beautiful visuals, but has to have great audio. And honestly, the audio for Digimon Survive, I would say, is a solid 9 out of 10. The music direction is absolutely fantastic, and the Japanese voice actors do an amazing job of conveying the feelings and emotions of their characters. Really fine stuff. From my understanding, I don't think there's an English dub even in the Western release, but I know that might be a make or break for some people. If there is an English dub, then kudos to you. If not, then you'll do need to rely on the localization and translations of the game, which is, of course, provided in English. And yeah, I do feel that the localization is a little bit wonky at times. I don't know. Let me know if you have any younger siblings. Maybe if you're in middle school right now, do you still use weak and weak sauce? Because I feel like that's just kind of outdated slang. But it's definitely in this game, so you can look forward to that. The only gripe I have about the audio is that sometimes it feels a little bit overstimulating. There are some scenes when you're outside where they want to add the ambient sound effects in, like running water, and just having that on sort of the same loop kind of started hurting my ears a little bit. But you can adjust the sound settings if you need to maybe lower some of the sound effects if it's necessary. But otherwise, good audio direction. To close out, then, we're going to talk about performance, which I know everyone's been waiting for. Honestly, performance isn't bad at all during the game. Visual novel elements don't really tax the switch too much. There we go. You will hear your switch maybe like fire up and be like in terms of that fan, but you won't get any drops in your visual fidelity. I've gotten no issues so far when docked, so that's fantastic. There were, I do admit, a few little maybe user interface issues regarding like the menu, but I was maybe just nitpicking too much, but there's nothing that really breaks the visual acuity of the game, nothing that hinders the performance. Same goes for the strategy elements in the battles as well. There's really nothing in there that harms any of the graphics of what you see. It's all pretty solid, which is fantastic. I will say, however, that load times are a bit excessive, especially when you first boot it up. I think when I first booted up Digimon Survive, I had to wait like a minute or two in order to kind of get into the game, which was a bit on the longer side. And in between each scene with the visual novels, there is, I would say, about a 30-second or so wait, depending on what scene you're moving into. With that said, though, once you're actually in the scene, don't worry too much about it. You won't have to worry about performance dropping. Excuse me. But in general, it's a solid game. It runs fairly well, at least from what I've experienced in the first 5 hours or so. All right, well, with that said, that is going to be my first thoughts on Digimon Survive. Let me know in the comments below if you have any questions about the game. I'd be happy to answer it. And if you picked it up yourself, let me know your experiences as well. Excuse me. Love to hear your thoughts on this game that we've been waiting years for. With that said, this is Sho. Thank you so much for checking out the video, and I will catch you next time. Cheers!